mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
It was extraordinary. I've never seen anything like that. Even the strongest supporters of Israel in administrations, Republican and Democratic, would at that point say, be proportional and be cautionary. And there was no restraint. Israel now is so empowered because of the administration's enmity with Iran that they now feel clearly that they can do anything.
And Andrea, we're looking at the split screen right now between what was going on, as I said, and what looked like a VIP tent at the Belmont Stakes. And what was happening is over 50 Palestinians were killed.
And the real loser here, the Palestinians are losers. They've had dreadful leadership for decades. We all know that. And it's not just Hamas. It's both branches of the Palestinian government. Abbas is a disgrace by now. So they've been disempowered. But the real loser is one of our strongest allies, never mentioned by anyone, King Abdullah of Jordan, who has a majority Palestinian country, who is going to be overwhelmed. The Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they're not going to care if in this grand scheme of Jared Kushner's, the Palestinians are lost in the shuffle. But King Abdullah will lose his country. He is completely vulnerable, at risk. And the fact is that they are now sort of mouthing generalities in the Sunni Arab Persian Gulf world about the Palestinians whom they don't really care about. But those on the front lines really care. Yep. It's just, to me, appalling that we have no vision at all. We got nothing for it, no pullback on settlements. There's no balancing act here.
Wow. So welcome to Stacy on the Right, American Family Radio, Urban Family Talk, and all ports in between, Periscope, Facebook, you name it, YouTube. We're doing our best to get the show out there so you can listen to it, watch it, share it. So please share the show. And thank you so much to people who are regularly in tuned, especially my crew of folks that were paying attention today. And we came on to the air a little bit on Facebook just for a few minutes. We were running some tests for our sound. And I have to say, huge thank you to the engineers who came out today and my executive producer, Devin Patrick, who just an amazing person to work with. And I've always been appreciative of everyone at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. And today is no different. I'm so grateful that they were able to come out. I hope you hear a difference in the sound. I hope it sounds more clear and good for you on the radio side as well as on the live streams. And we have a jam-packed show for you again today. We actually have just added a second guest. So we're so excited about that. We are going to be talking about the Seattle tax hikes, which were done. Basically, Amazon weighed in and said, we are the largest employer in your city, and we do not agree with this proposed tax hike. And they thought it through and said, yeah, you know what? We don't care. We're going to tax you. We're going to tax you hard. And here it comes. So they voted on it, and we're going to talk about that. You just heard MSNBC's Andrea Mitchell saying that it is appalling how the U.S. moved the embassy to Jerusalem, even though it's accepted law. It is the law of the land. It is something that both Democratic and Republican presidents have promised to do. Andrea Mitchell, she's a veteran reporter and journalist, someone who has been on the scene for decades. You would think she would have that historical fact down by now. You don't have to agree with it, but you can't disagree with the fact that it's law. So interesting to hear her say that. Our guests for today are Gabriella Hoffman, who's a media strategist and conservative consultant. She's a 2A chick and sport and stream hunter extraordinaire. She's going to come on today. We can't wait to talk to her in hour one. And then in hour two, we have Marc Lotter. He's the former press secretary to Vice President Pence. He was press secretary to Mike Pence, I believe, back when he was the governor. I'm so excited to speak with him about the Pence-Trump prospects in the midterms. And I want to welcome in people who might be headed over from some other areas of Facebook. Please share the show, and glad to be with you. Please comment and also like the page on Facebook, like the YouTube stream, and subscribe over there. StacyOnTheRight.com is my website. Head over to that one and subscribe as well. Lots of work to do, but you have time. You're listening to the show. So we just heard that from Andrea Mitchell. I, for one, am praising God for the development of us having our embassy inside of Jerusalem. In to acknowledge the right of Israel to determine what their capital is as a nation state. It's wonderful. I'm grateful that we get to do it. And so, you know, there's really, we're going to see people pitching a fit, throwing a tantrum, behaving however they like. And, you know, that's their right. It's our right to be happy about this development and to take a little bit of good news, wherever we can find it, and to rejoice over it. Next off, we have, so you remember Bernie Sanders, right, guys? So Bernie Sanders, his former campaign manager, actually went on television to talk about how Bernie Sanders really won, even though he lost. So he didn't win the nomination for his party. He's an independent socialist, but he ran as a Democrat for the presidential run. And in the primary against Hillary Clinton, he had no chance because they'd already rigged it against him. But he says he's won. And I have to say, because, you know, it's a rare day in the world that I would agree with Bernie Sanders. But in this instance, I have to say, unfortunately, he may have some truth going on here. Now, why? Why would I say that? Well, the reason I'm saying that is because he's right. Issues that were once fringe, like outside of what the Democrats would think was their party's platform, or even something that they would openly admit to. I'm not talking about their closed door meetings. I mean, out in public on TV. Now they routinely refer to these items as things that they must work towards, that things that are definitely on the horizon, they're in their future, or they're things they're trying to insert into policy right now. This is a danger for all of us. And I know, so routinely on YouTube and other places, liberals will listen to shows like this and they'll mock the fact that we say it's a danger, that we want to destroy progressivism, that we're against all the things that progressives are for. And I understand that because we are against them, and it may seem funny to them, but we do want to stop them from radically changing America. I don't know how successful we're being if you look at the things they've been able to accomplish. So listen to it. This is Sanders' 2016 campaign manager, and he's talking about these so-called fringe issues that are now articles of faith. He calls them articles of faith, which is interesting, an interesting development from him. It's number 4.
Join us now, 2016 campaign manager for Bernie Sanders, Jeff Weaver. He's out with the new book, How Bernie Won, Inside the Revolution That's Taking Back Our Country and Where We Go From Here. Jeff, good morning. Good to have you with us.
Hey, great to be here.
You got a nice blurb at the top.
I do, from
Bernie Sanders himself, yes.
Exactly.
So let's just talk about the title, How Bernie Won. What exactly prevailed and what endures from his campaign?
Yeah, I think if you look across the country in terms of grassroots activism from one end of this country to another, I think a lot of that started in our campaign in 2016. There's obviously been a lot of other influences, you know, the women's movement and other movements, the immigrant movement, immigrant rights movement has sort of become activated under the Trump presidency. But I think you saw the sort of spark of this in the campaign. And then I would also say on the policy side, you know, when Bernie started, he was at 3%, 4%, 5%. And he was talking about things like free public college. He was talking about universal health care. He was talking about $15 minimum wage. Well, those are all, you know, basically articles of faith in the Democratic Party now. And they were considered sort of out on the fringe at the beginning of that campaign.
He's right. There's been an acceleration in the ideological shift of the Democrats over to what looks like European socialism. But we've not heard any of the same types of things as it pertains to on the right. So as much as people want to talk about the alt-right and the rise of these weird, hardcore nationalist individuals, and again, I point you to the information. The most important thing we can do is have at least correct information on these things that we're talking about. And so Dr. Carol Swain, who's running for the mayor of Nashville, she actually wrote a book about this I almost 15 years ago. She talked about how the shift into demographics, in other words, respecting people's characteristics instead of their character, would lead to certain individuals in the country, there'd be a backlash among them where they would start to claim not just nationalism, but white nationalism as a pushback mechanism to the whole, you know, blacks deserve special rights and privileges, Hispanics deserve special rights and privileges, even people who are here illegally, border crossers, they deserve special rights and privileges. And so you get to a place where everyone sitting at the table having special rights and privileges except one group, that group would then push back. And she described that in her book. And I just encourage you to read it for yourself. But this is Jeff Weaver. He was Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign manager, and he wrote this new book. It's called How Bernie Won. And he goes on to MSNBC's Morning Joe to discuss how what were once fringe liberal issues are now mainstream. And he uses the term articles of faith. So I thought that sounded familiar, articles of faith, but that's actually specific to the Latter-day Saints. Within the Latter-day Saint movement, Mormonism, articles of faith are a creed composed by Joseph Smith as a part of an 1842 letter sent to Long John Wentworth. And he was the editor of the Chicago Democrat and first published in the Latter-day Saint newspaper Times and Seasons. It's a concise listing of 13 fundamental doctrines of Mormonism. So articles of faith is, in this man, Jason Weaver's estimation, the articles of faith for the Democrats are $15 an hour minimum wage, universal health care, these kind of things that they had once said, no, we don't. We're not for universal health care. We're not for single payer, because universal health care is a misnomer. It's single payer, meaning everyone gets the exact same policy and lots of people get to die because they can't be seen. I find it amazing that this guy, Weaver, actually utilized a religious moniker, articles of faith, to basically connect this new leftism that has infected the Democrats, to equate that with something that is so fundamental to the practice of the faith of Mormonism. Now, you can go all in and out about how Mormonism is not it's not Christianity or it's a faith. I have met people who practice, they're Latter-day Saints, and they swear up and down that they believe in Jesus Christ and they are Christians, and there's no difference in their practice of their religion as when compared to Christianity. I understand all that. I don't want to have that debate right here now in the program. What I would encourage you to do is look up what Hank Hanegraaff has said about it. He did an in-depth series of programs on the subject. And for this particular topic, I'm just drawing I'm connecting for you that this guy Weaver, he feels like $15 an hour minimum wage and these other hardcore leftist policies are central now to the Democrats. And that is a change. And I honestly believe that out there in the world, among people who, good, decent people, good, hardworking Americans who are Christians, who are also Democrats, that they would not agree that some of these things that he's calling articles of faith for Democrats, they wouldn't agree that they're articles of faith. I honestly, I've met some of these people, so I don't think he speaks for everyone. And just like, most groups are not monoliths, meaning everyone within believes every single tenet identically, then it's the same for what Democrats far and wide, local and, way over in California, compare a Californian Democrat to a Democrat in Texas. I think you're going to find that they have some things in common and a lot of things that they disagree on. So I don't agree with him on that. I do think we're starting to see where there's not going to be very much space. It's either going to be that these corporations that are hard on the left are very, very close to their counterparts in local government, or they're going to be pretty far apart, because the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democrats doesn't leave a lot of room for negotiation or for movement on issues. You either believe in 15 an hour or you don't. You either believe in single payer or you don't. You either think socialism is evil or you don't. There's no room for any nuance there, which is why it's so fascinating to see what's happening in Seattle. Now, I believe we mentioned here on the program that the Seattle City Council was planning on implementing a per worker tax on all of the people who operate within the city limits so that they could raise enough money to handle it's an explosion of homeless people. Well, Amazon replied, if you do that, we're going to have to rethink our second large building that we're currently have under construction and planning and zoning, and we're going to have to rethink having our employees there. Well, the city council said, yeah, you can rethink anything you want to. We're doing it. They're hitting the local companies with a $47 million tax burden in addition to what they pay. And at the end, they chanted, "We'll be back for more. We will be back for more." So Seattle just told the world that if you're going to bring jobs to Seattle, the tax and spenders in the city will tax them a little now, more later. It's better to invest in a different city, perhaps a different state. And that's the quote from Grover Norquist. All right, we'll be back with our first guest on today's program. You keep it here.
Nearly 1 in 4 pregnancies in America will end in abortion. The Ministry of Preborn provides free ultrasounds for abortion-minded women throughout America. When a mother sees her baby on an ultrasound and hears the baby's heartbeat, she's 80% more likely to keep her baby.
They introduced me to my child for the first time through an ultrasound. I was able to see this life growing inside of me, hear the heartbeat, and nothing else mattered at that point. I wasn't afraid anymore. I got to meet my child for the first time, and it changed everything. I was a mother to be.
Your gift of $140 will cover the cost of 5 ultrasounds. All donations are tax deductible, and 100% of your gift goes to saving babies. To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby, or donate securely at preborn.com. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with the Legacy Moment. I wish I could tell you I've never felt overwhelmed or weary or never had my faith shaken. That would be a lie. There have been a few seasons in my life in which I've said I can't take this anymore. I wanted to walk away from the pressure. At times I felt outnumbered by the enemy's forces, but then I would retreat to my Heavenly Father. Always He restores my energy, He grants me perspective, and renews my faith. Whenever we lose sight of the greatness of our God, we are overwhelmed by the challenges. It happened to Moses back in Numbers chapter 11, when there was one complaint after another. Here they are out in the wilderness, and they don't like the menu. Moses does the best thing he can do. He cries out to God. Listen to God's tender advice to Moses, what he says to lift his chin. God declares in Numbers chapter 11, verses 23 through 25, "And the Lord said to Moses, Is the Lord's power limited? Now you shall see whether my word will come true for you or not." So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord. This is precious. In other words, God says, Moses, Moses, come here, brother. How big am I? How big am I? I don't know what you're going through today. I don't know what challenges are before you today. But God can handle it. Yes, He can. God can handle it. Maybe what you need to do is pull back and give yourself to worship. Take your eyes off the challenges. Listen for God's solution, and then do everything He says. Here's what I want you to remember today. God has everything you need to face the challenges, but He wants you to face Him first. Then go out and deal with the challenges.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
All right. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I wanted to add one more thing to that discussion we just had going out of the last break about the Americans for Tax Reform reporting on Seattle, the city council hiking taxes on all of their workers. It's funny that the quote from Amazon Vice President Drew Hardner is pretty stinging for the Seattle government people. His quote is, "The city does not have a revenue problem. It has a spending efficiency problem." Whoa, that's not that nice. He's hitting back. He's letting them know we see you and we don't like what we see. So it remains to be seen if they'll answer what their threat and move away from Seattle, if they're going to look for greener pastures in areas with lower tax rates. Who knows? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome good friend of the show and Second Amendment and sporting enthusiast, activist, and trainer to almost everyone you can think of. This woman trains on social media and a ton of really, really great topics, as well as hunting and fishing and cleaning her own stuff that she doesn't just leave it to some other person to do. She does the whole thing from beginning to end, which is amazing. If you don't follow her on Instagram, you're missing out. It's Gabriella Hoffman, media strategist and conservative consultant. Gabriella, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for such a lovely introduction, Stacey. I hope you're well today.
I'm running at the top speed trying to catch up with all the stuff on my list. But I have to say, it's nice to sit down and have a chance to talk to you and catch up. And it was a nice intro for sure. But you guys, I'm not kidding. You have to go to her Instagram and follow. Gabriella, tell them what your Instagram handle is so they can check it out too.
Oh, sure. It's very simple. Just Gabriella_Hoffman. Yeah, I know. Much like you, I'm a go-getter like you, and I like to keep myself involved to stay busy and out of trouble. That's what you have to do. That's what I hope my other millennials do, too.
Yeah.
But no, I'm excited to come on and chat, and I'm going to make this as relaxing as possible for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so what I have is over at themaven.net, which is actually the Resurgent, the website, Eric Erickson's Resurgent, which is really cool. Yeah. Great website. You have up here this piece, and it's written by you. It's over 1,000 comments submitted against anti-gun Oregon Initiative Petition 43. So first off, what is the Oregon Initiative Petition 43?
Sure. Well, it's a ballot measure proposal because it hasn't been introduced to the ballot yet. But the state of Oregon, a group of interfaith leaders, in response to the Parkland shooting, put forth this potential Oregon Initiative Petition 43 to ban, if you read through the legislation and comb through it, ultimately what it would do if this were to go into place and voted in November and go into law in January, would ban most semi-automatic firearms, basic rifles, handguns, things of that sort. So it's under the guise of like, okay, we'll ban assault rifles, but when you dig deeper and read through the legislation, which is actually surprisingly 4 pages long, the proposal, ultimately what it does is it will want to get rid of so-called military-style looking semi-automatic rifles. And if this were to pass, this would be probably one of the most grotesque measures of gun control to ever pass, to go after not simply just fully automatic firearms, which are mostly highly regulated, very hard to obtain. It would actually extend to firearms which are enjoyed by many people, definitely enjoyed and used by law-abiding citizens. So it would be very bad precedent if this petition were to pass and get on the ballot in November. So the Secretary of State opened it up for a comment period, and that period just expired, and over 1,000 people, 1,060 commenters exactly, over the course of the last 2 weeks in late April through early May, submitted their dismay with this proposed ballot initiative petition 43. And they said, according to records that they released to the public through their Secretary of State office, it's the most comments received of any proposal or proposed ballot initiative ever to come to the Secretary of State's office. So people in Oregon, people think that it's just Portland and Eugene, Oregon. It's actually very rural, ran and inhabited by hunters. I have a lot of good friends in the outdoor industry who reside in Oregon, and they sounded the alarm on this, and I think the rest of the state is catching on as well. So I don't think they're going to go without a fight for this kind of measure.
So let's talk a little bit about what they're trying to do, because I think one of the things that I'm trying to, Gabriella, it's a stretch, but I've been saying to myself when I read this stuff about them wanting to ban a certain gun, or when someone says to me, why do you need an AR-15? Instead of immediately, my visceral reaction is, why do I need cowgirl boots? Why do I need coffee with creamer in it when I could just drink straight black coffee? Why do we need anything? We just need water and heat and cooling, and you know what I mean? You just need air. You just need the basics. You don't even need you don't even need more than 2 outfits. You just need one to wear while you wash the other one. We don't need any more square footage than I think 300 square feet per person is the minimum amount that, keeps people in good relationships with each other. If they're strangers, so if you're family, you need even less than that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we don't need that we have. But instead of going there, I've been trying to say, okay, wait, stop, pump the brakes. This person may or may not even understand how many other firearms are identical in their use and lethality as an AR-15. Because the AR-15 is the boogeyman of choice, but it's really, it's ubiquitous. There are so many other guns that do the same thing that don't look the same. So we want to understand where they're coming from. We have to stop ourselves from getting upset and basically understand that this whole petition is so that they can hopefully stop school shootings. So my question is, in addition to Initiative 43. Let's just give them Initiative 43. They're proposed banning some firearms. What else have they proposed in the mental health arena, in the school situation to arm teachers, or even better detection systems for kids who are outside the norm and might be, getting to a place where they've been bullied enough to want to hurt someone? Anything else?
I haven't seen anything else aside from this initiative petition 43. I think they're obfuscating the main primary problem, which is that horrible individuals obtain access to firearms. And Oregon itself had a mass shooting a few years ago at the community college over there. And I think, I don't know how, I forget exactly how it was curbed and stopped, but the person was a criminal and they had a very bad criminal past or something disgruntled with their family. But no, apart from trying to full out ban firearms of the semi-automatic variety, I haven't seen any mental health proposals, no school initiative reforms, whether it's arming teachers or using the school shield program or rejecting the Obama-era program, which failed to report delinquency among children, I believe, to the school board or higher ups or to the federal government, I would say. So, no, they just want to ban firearms, unfortunately, and I would like to be shown other evidence of any other reforms, but unfortunately this is what seems to be in the public eye right now, this proposal.
Okay. So it just, since we're talking about it, I might as well just go ahead and say, I want to be on the record, Gabriella, that I could understand them saying, look, in addition to our desire to limit the use of the AR-15, we also want to make sure that we cover all the bases by saying, look at the problems at the Broward County shooting, at the Parkland, shooting. Mm-hmm. There were a number of other things that came to the fore. And while to me they're not as important, I'm speaking as the activist here, the gun control activist, I do understand that they played a role in what happened. And so I want to see some things surrounding the whole spectrum. In other words, you don't just lock one of your doors at night, you go lock them all, right? So you practice the surround sound type of door locking thing. If you only have one door, you lock that one. But if you have other doors, if you have windows, anything that someone could enter into at night, you shut all that down. Why not shut down the other avenues by which these school shooters have been able to get into buildings and, increase the amount of students they've been able to kill, increase the exposure? There's been so many things that we've seen that just one or two factors been changed. The number of people who were killed would have been greatly reduced or even eliminated, et cetera, et cetera. Why aren't these people doing that?
Well, they want to scapegoat something because aesthetically it looks very scary. And I mean, before I really got into firearms, much like anyone who's fairly new to it or has some semblance of exposure to it, it is a scary looking thing, much like a car could be very scary. A car kills far more people than firearms do in this country. Opioids, very scary looking stuff. They can kill far more people, innumerable amounts of people, and they have. It's actually, I think opioids were just rated one of the biggest killers of Americans in this country, topping car crashes and also firearms.
55,000 for the last year reported.
Per year.
Yeah, that's a lot more than are killed.
A lot of people.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of people simply because of these substances that are readily available, and they enact far more horror and carnage than firearms do. I mean, in spite of the ballistics and all that. I'm not downplaying obviously those who are in mass shootings, obviously, but they kill as many people, cause same bodily harm as a bullet would to individuals, but the frequency is a lot higher, obviously. But I think if you were to, let's say, ban an AR-15, which, as we have read and studies have numerously concluded, and FBI reports as well, it's handguns that are normally used when perpetrating crimes, when criminals perpetrate crimes. AR-15s, despite their prevalence in recent mass shootings, unfortunately, they don't commit, or they're not used by perpetrators in great frequency as handguns. So as interesting as it is, I'm surprised they're not calling for outright banning of handguns from the public. But because it is aesthetically very scary, it looks almost like a military-style firearm, but it's not. If you dig into it deeper and study the mechanics and ballistics and know the nomenclature behind it. But again, it's just a matter of evading the problem we've seen with all these recent mass shooting cases in Vegas, Parkland, and the Sutherland Springs. A lot of the times there were gaps that were not filled, problem of the federal government, the FBI, military branches, not relaying information to the FBI, failure of local police, as we saw in Broward County, responding to the numerous threats that this shooter had been subject of. So you can ban all the firearms you want, and crimes could still be enacted with knives, with other tools, cars, as we see in Europe with recent terrorist attacks. So they're going to find other tools to perpetrate crimes with. You can try to ban firearms, and maybe it will prevent a little bit, or carnage won't be exacted as much as normally it would be, but people will find other tools to exact the same exact kind of pain, harm, and torment onto people with whom they intend to target. So they'll find different tools. They do pressure cookers, which is just as powerful as a bullet when strikes into someone. So they'll find other ways to exact crime and harm to people. So banning it, as we have learned and have studied and researched exclusively, won't do anything, much like any other prohibition-type measures.
Yeah, which is interesting because the same arguments that are used, so I happen to be someone who's not a proponent of legalizing marijuana for recreational use. I think that it should be available for people who are experiencing, excruciating pain and they need treatment options. So in other words, just like we don't have recreational use of Oxycontin, and other really high schedule painkillers, they're really dangerous to take and they're habit forming. So we control those. And so I think they should treat marijuana the same way. If people need it to deal with pain from horrible cancers and things that they're experiencing, of course. But for recreational use, I'm not a fan. So people always say, well, you can't control it. People are going to use it anyway. But then if I say, well, you're never going to get all of the AR-15s off this. We'll just confiscate them. We'll just take people's kids away. We will. And you're like, but yeah. So how do you get the kids away from the people who have the guns? Like, what do you think you're doing exactly? So I don't understand how people they miss the fact that the same argument that they use for marijuana legalization is the same one that impugns their ability to be able to confiscate. Guesstimates using the NICS database, Gabriella put gun ownership numbers. 91 million Americans own guns is the guesstimate, but those 91 million Americans own between 400 and 600 million guns. That's what's out in the legal, lawful gun market right now in this country. The 350 million is such an old estimate from decades ago, and it's so low. I'm just trying to figure out, if we can't deport 11 million people who are here illegally, how do we collect 400 million guns? Even if it's only 350 million, how do we collect them? How do we get them?
It's impossible. You can't do that because people are going to protest, and rightfully so. Because if they weren't doing anything wrong, law-abiding, if they're law-abiding, which the majority of gun owners are, why are they going to allow themselves to surrender their firearms? That doesn't work. They tried it in the Soviet Union, where my parents came from, and look what it rendered there. It rendered mass carnage, unhappiness, people in gulags and concentration camps, and just even death ultimately. And confiscation doesn't work. Like, people forget that if you fail to learn from history, you're going to be doomed to repeat it again. That's a mere paraphrasing of the George Santayana quote. But I see from my own family history that kind of policy doesn't work. And goodness, try doing it here in the United States. You're going to face blowback. And it's not a call to arms or anything crazy, but people don't know that people are going to defend themselves from confiscation, especially if they're law-abiding too. So they just want to find, again, scapegoating. They don't want to address the problem because a lot of them, sadly, thrive off of mass shootings, or the fact that, okay, we can use this crisis and never let it go to waste, like what much of the left will do, unfortunately. And they'll want to pigeonhole gun owners for crimes that are committed by criminals, rather than simply singling out the criminal and making them an example of this is who perpetrates the crime. You can't place it on the backs of the law-abiding. And it's something we're going to continue to have to face and debate, and hopefully the side will listen. But, I mean, if anything is evidence of, I would say, our side winning, although we still do face a lot of challenges. More people are joining the National Rifle Association. People are buying firearms for self-defense measures in greater numbers. More records are broken through the FBI NICS, federal NICS background check system. So people are going to respond with open calls for firearm confiscation this way, in a civil way, purchasing firearms symbolically, joining the NRA whether or not they own firearms themselves, and just take certain measures to not allow the Second Amendment to be done away with. So people are going to react, and I would say our side reacts generally very charitably and smartly, without raising the alarm or stoking fire or fear. for the most part, but it's, it'll be a constant pulling and tugging, unfortunately, but we just have to be prepared and vigilant.
Absolutely. Everything you just said. And so thank you for coming on and having a very
appreciate it, Stacey.
calming
Thank
interview.
you.
Fantastic. Thank you for your work over at the Resurgent, themaven.net. I'll put the link in all of the different streams so you guys can read the article. Good piece. Thanks, Gabriella. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Stacey. Have a wonderful day.
You too. All right. So we're going to be back with more of this show right here on all of these different places where you're getting it. Thank you for your ears. Keep it here. We'll be right back.
This is Uncommon Moments with Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren on their uncommon marriage adventure. Available now in paperback.
Some of us have seen some great role modeling. We've had the benefit of having a great dad who was a great husband. Some of us haven't had that benefit. But at the end of the day, we all have questions. Well, I've always found the best way to get those questions answered is to go to an expert, go to a guy with Hall of Fame credentials. The person we need to talk to about that and get those answers is Jesus Christ. Now, there may be some of you saying, well, wait a minute now. I know the Lord knows everything. He created women, but he was never married to one. How does he know about being a husband? Well, trust me, he does.
The Uncommon Marriage Adventure by Tony and Lauren Dungy. Now available in softcover from Tyndale Momentum. More info at CoachDungy.com.
It's time to call your senators. We need to tell them to put an end to the liberals' filibuster, switch to a majority vote, and defund Planned Parenthood. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Senators respond to constituent calls. So call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki Addison of Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk. Family is so important to everything. I mean, think about it. Right after God created Adam, He made family by creating Eve as his wife.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference this summer. We have a full slate of experts to help encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family.
Our speakers include Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, and more.
We'll even be there.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference will be Friday and Saturday, August 17th and 18th at Hope Church in Tupelo, Mississippi. Come help us fight back against the enemy's direct attack on marriage and family. That's the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference, put on by Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
This is Stacey on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
You think all the way back to the Reagan administration during the Pershing missiles in Europe thing, and we were on the verge of nuclear war. The left is always on the verge of something, and they think that the right is going to start something. But in fact, what's happened is, just look, there's going to be a peace conference. There's going to be a summit conference in Korea. Iran deal has now been negated. That's going to sort itself out. What Trump does is he shows that the big dog gets respect. And this is something that the Democrats and the media have a very hard time understanding, because everything they learned, they learned in kindergarten.
Right, but you say he's the most effective president since FDR. How do you back that up? FDR accomplished a lot.
Well, he did
in the middle of a Great Depression.
Yes, that's true. But in the beginning of the famous 100 days, when all this legislation got passed, when things got done, what the president's done, I believe, in this year plus, is get more done against greater opposition than anyone I've seen in my lifetime, certainly. And all of this stuff, the foreign policy stuff, the domestic stuff, the tax cuts, this is a pretty impressive record of accomplishment.
It actually is pretty impressive. And I think, and You want to be clear about how there are things that aren't going according to plan. The omnibus spending bill, for one, the continual funding of Planned Parenthood. There are a few things that I would say, you know, if I had the chance, I would say, what are we doing about this, President Trump or Vice President Pence or, you know, whoever you get the chance to speak with? What are we doing about this? But in any leadership position, you're going to have the opportunity to kind of get some of your things you'll fight through and you'll get them done. And other things you'll put them, okay, they're still on the plan. This is turning into a long-term solution because I thought I'd be able to take care of it, but it's just, you know, I'm experiencing difficulty. And so I choose to take that tack with a lot of this. I think what we're seeing is it's interesting. In fact, so let's talk a little bit about, and I didn't pull audio for this because it was so infuriating. So you may have seen this story out in the news about this Yale graduate student who happens to be Black. She fell asleep in the dorm common room, and a young woman who happens to be white, saw her sleeping in the common room with books and study material. So she just wasn't in there like a homeless person. And on the Yale graduate side of the campus in this dorm, you don't just need a key card to get in. You need a key card to get in and make the elevator work. Now, I know you've surely stayed in one of the hotels around town when you've been on vacation. You can't take the elevator up unless you basically unlock the elevator with your key. So you get into the elevator, you can get in it all you want, but you can't make it go up unless you put your key over the little black circle, and then the elevator will take a command from you to 11 or 10 or whatever number floor you need to go to. Then when you get off the elevator, you still have to use that key to get into your room. So you can't get into any room on the floor, only the one that key is authorized for. So they have something similar at the Yale Graduate School graduate dormitory. And apparently it's a like 10 or 11 story building. I don't know how many stories it is. I just know the stories that are coming out, the tales of woe are coming out, are surrounding this, I guess, 10th floor, 11th floor. So this young woman tells the woman who's sleeping, she says, you can't be here. You can't sleep here. I'm calling the police. Not you can't be here. You can't sleep here. I'm going to get the RA, but I'm going to get the police. So, of course, the campus police come. The woman who fell asleep in the common room gets up and they ask for her ID. She says, I shouldn't have to show you my ID. I live here. Let me show you. She walks over to the dorm room door, opens the door and says, do you see? I live here. I have a key to this room. This is my room. And she goes in and eventually they do force her to show the ID. She shows the ID. And after detaining her for almost 20 minutes, then she's released and told she can go. And she keeps asking them, why are you doing this? And he says, we're responding to a call. So, you know, we don't know either one of you and we have to investigate. We have to ask you for your ID. And we're just trying to do what we're required to do when someone calls us. So it turns out the woman who called the police on the girl who was napping in the dorm also has called the police on other Black people in the graduate dorm. So if she sees you and you're Black, she's going to call the police. Here's what's key. On Whoopi Goldberg's The View, Whoopi tries to paint this as something that's happening strictly because Donald Trump is a racist. But if you do a little research, and Whoopi has a team, this is what is so annoying to me as I struggle to get through all of my stuff during the day. Whoopi has a team, and she doesn't know this. I don't have a team of people who are researching stuff for me and you know, preparing this program for me. And I even know that the girl in question, the young woman in question who called the police on 2 Black students in the Yale graduate dorms over the past 2 weeks, is a hardcore leftist who both believes in banning burqas and because that's not a leftist ideal, but she also believes in like hardcore leftist ideology. And she has not 3, but 4 degrees. She has double engineering degree, a counseling degree, and she's working on a degree right now. That's why she's in the Yale graduate dorms. So you're probably wondering, well, what is it? So, okay, I get it. The idea for the people on The View is that they have to connect this racist activity from a hardcore leftist. They have to erase the fact that a leftist is the one who's repeatedly doing this and connect it to Donald Trump. And how do I get there from where I was? Listen to that audio of Donald Trump's accomplishments, because that's what they'd rather talk about than giving Donald Trump some credit for, you know, following U.S. law and moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Now, I understand that's a sacred cow for leftists, so maybe you don't want to give him credit for that. How about giving him credit for at least moving Kim Jong-un to the table and getting the release of the 3 detainees. And other detainees have been released under Republican and Democratic presidents from North Korea. They tend to do this, but he still gets some credit for it. How about giving some credit for that? In all things, we should be able to, at the very minimum, just acknowledge, look, I don't agree with this person on a lot, but they're right about X, or they did accomplish this. That at least would give some credibility to those people so that we could view the program and at least understand, look, they can see the truth that's coming out of the, the television or the news reports, et cetera, et cetera. I don't believe that the increase in incidences that we're seeing around the United States of white people calling the cops on black people who are doing normal things has anything to do with Donald Trump. Remember, the racist ideology, anything that has to do with racism, is rooted in enmity to God. You're shaking your fist at God. You're shaking your fist at God's creation. And this is something that any person can be guilty of. You can be black and be racist against white people or Asians or Jewish people. You can be Hispanic and be racist against any number of people. You can be of any ethnic background and be racist towards other people, because it's really all it boils down to is hatred. Blaming someone's actions on someone else, in other words, the girl who called the police on these people, she's not responsible. It's Donald Trump who's responsible. We should no longer be willing to buy into that. Even if you're a Democrat, or if you're on the left, or if you're progressive, or you believe in social democracy or whatever you're calling it, when you hear someone say person A did whatever they did because of person B, you should immediately stop that. Hey, wait a minute. Adults are responsible for their own actions. Maybe it's her ideology that makes her hate black people or hate women sleeping in dorms, common rooms, or hate men on elevators who ask for directions, whatever. The point is that it can't be that Donald Trump, either he's all powerful, because the mocking that goes on towards him is just ridiculous. The things people say about Donald Trump, the things that they say he can't do, he's not smart enough to do. Yet he's in the White House, and in the evening time or whenever he has any free time, I don't know when he has any as the president, he's like a puppet master controlling everybody. He's making all the white people in the country turn into racists. They don't want to. They're just innocent. But Donald Trump's making them do it. He's enabling them to do it because some comment he made about Charlottesville. I don't buy it. And neither should you. So, in other news about what the Democrats think about the race here in Missouri, this is where the rubber meets the road. Democrats are spending $5.2 million on ads in our battleground. So Missouri's a battleground state all of a sudden. Cool. According to NBC, let's see. Oh, yeah. NBC News' First Read newsletter put out this morning details on ad spending in the top Senate battlegrounds. And across the 2018 Senate landscape, the vulnerable red state Senate Democrats are either outspending their GOP challengers over the TV and radio airwaves, or they're keeping the disparity as close as possible. So in Arizona, you've got the Democrats spending $2.2 million. The GOP contender has spent $376,000. In Florida, the GOP contender has spent $8.8 million. The Democrat has spent $185,000. Now, I'll go all the way down. I'm not going to read them all, but they cover all of the battleground states: Arizona, Florida, Indiana, Missouri, Montana, Nevada, North Dakota, Tennessee, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. And in Wisconsin, the GOP has spent $8.9 million, Democrat $5.1 million. But here in Missouri, Claire McCaskill and the Democrats have outspent our candidate by half, like twice as much. You got the Democrats spending $5.2 million and the GOP spending $2.5 million. So it's obviously very important to them that they keep this seat. And it's all good. Keep it. Don't keep it. We're going to work to unelect Claire McCaskill. We don't know the future. We have no idea if it's going to work, but we're just going to pray, and we're hoping that we get a really good candidate for the general to go up against Claire McCaskill. what I kind of feel like is happening across the country when we look at these races is we have a number of people who have shown up and they've said, look, I'm similar to Donald Trump in that I'm an unconventional candidate. And a lot of these unconventional candidates come with that kind of unconventional baggage, because when people know they're going into politics, they often, they're above board, they keep their nose clean, and they try to toe the line because they know the Oppo research people are going to go into them and check everything. With unconventional candidates who have been in business or what have you, they've lived their lives however they've lived their lives. Sometimes it's differently. And then they come into the political arena and the scrutiny can be really out of control. I thought, especially in meeting the people that we met last week at the Senate Candidate Forum, that they were interesting, that they had interesting backgrounds, a lot of them really impressive backgrounds, flying planes and, for the Navy and the Air Force. It was really interesting to hear their stories. But in the end, it's really going to be about how they govern and what they believe. And I've seen a lot of discussion of late about how some people don't want religion shoved in their face. So this is a Christian program. I'm not shoving religion in your face, but obviously we're discussing Christianity and the Christian worldview as it intersects with politics and culture. And I think when I hear that, I hear someone who's been hurt by Christians or hurt by people that were practicing Christianity, maybe at church or maybe outside of that environment. And they're saying, I'm just looking for somebody who's going to do the right thing. That kind of ignores the fact that we are all fallen individuals. We're all depraved. And the only thing that keeps us from that utter depravity is a savior. It's Jesus Christ. And so when you say, well, I just don't want somebody who's going to throw religion in my face, but you're considering voting for an agnostic, you have to understand there's no boundary there. There's no line. And for that person who is an agnostic, for you to trust them to defend your religious liberty, it's a real stretch. I mean, think about that for a second. Would you expect a person who is a teetotaler or completely opposed to drinking alcohol to protect your right to drink alcohol with the same fervency as someone who does drink alcohol? Would you expect someone who has consciously chosen not to have children and has gone so far as to have all of their reproductive parts removed so that they can never be a parent to defend parental rights and to understand parenting and the relationship between parent and child and all of the dynamics of a family? Would you expect that person to be the best possible person to defend your rights in the parenting sphere? I wouldn't. So by no means am I saying that in order to be a good defender of a liberty, you have to have experienced that liberty. There are plenty of people who are fantastic advocates for children who've never had children. But I am saying on the subject of faith, someone who chooses to actually label themselves an agnostic, how can that person be the ultimate defender of God-given liberties? I mean, help me out here. Help me understand how that person is better to defend your religious rights, your religious liberties, or the liberties that are given to you by God and enshrined in the Constitution. How can that person be the one to do it? Agnosticism is the view that the existence of God, of the divine or the supernatural, is unknown or unknowable. So if the person declares that they cannot know God, they cannot know the origin of the universe, how can you expect them to adequately defend your right to practice religion, faith, and to acknowledge God? I pose to you that they cannot. They choose not to by labeling themselves as an agnostic. We'll be back with Hour 2 right after this. Stay there.
Urban Family Talk.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. Our motto is truth, wisdom, and empowerment. We felt that this motto reflects what we want to be to the urban community. We ask God today to give our community wisdom from God. truth, which is Jesus Christ, and empowerment through the Holy Spirit as we seek to be the community that God has called the Black community to be. Stay connected at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency meeting today to discuss Monday's violence on the Israel-Gaza border. U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley chided the Security Council for what she sees as its failure to address Iran's actions in the region.
The United States welcomes a discussion of this violence in the Middle East. We welcome discussing the ways we can cooperate with each other to put an end to this violence. There is far too little discussion in the Security Council on Iran's destabilizing presence in Syria, its promotion of violence in Yemen, its support for terrorism in Gaza, and its dangerous and illegal weapons buildup in Lebanon.
A federal appeals court is set to hear about the president's plan to end the DACA program. John Decker has more.
The 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco will be the first federal appeals court to hear arguments about President Trump's decision to phase out the DACA program, which protected some 700,000 people who were brought to the U.S. illegally as children. In January, a federal judge blocked the Trump administration's decision to end DACA, reinstating the program in a decision that applied nationwide. In doing so, U.S. District Judge William Alsup rejected the argument that President Obama exceeded his power in implementing DACA. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
A Texas pastor is urging the Southern Baptist Convention to take a stand against the social justice movement and worldview. Bill Bumpus reports.
Grady Arnold is pastor of Calvary Baptist Church in Cuero, Texas. He has submitted a proposal to the Resolutions Committee, hoping it would be accepted and presented to delegates for approval at the annual meeting in Dallas next month.
Within the Southern Baptist Convention, there's been a move towards social justice for quite a while, over 10 years, but it's been kind of under the radar. I'm very concerned that the embracing of the social justice agenda will hurt the Southern Baptist Convention. It won't help it, and certainly probably bring it to a more liberal theology, which I think would be very harmful for the convention.
Grady tells AFN that social justice, by definition, is based on anti-biblical and destructive concepts of Marxist ideology, with one of the key elements being redistribution.
Basically, everything needs to be reapportioned, and so the opportunities and privileges that some have in the Marxist idea need to be redistributed to those who have less. It's a very damning theology and ideology, and it's very dangerous to bring it into the church.
Grady says with this resolution proposal, he's sounding the alarm and informing fellow Southern Baptists about what's taking place within the denomination. I'm Bill Bumpus.
A pro-family activist and conservative columnist says the recent decision by the Mormon Church to exit from the Scouts is good for boys. Chad Groening explains.
Robert Knight is a columnist for the Washington Times. His latest column is called Saying Goodbye to Equivocation, Why the Mormon Exodus from the Scouts is Good for Boys. Knight, who was an Eagle Scout, is praising the Salt Lake City-based religion for finally figuring out that they can't do business with the devil.
As an Eagle Scout myself, I'm saddened to report that any decline in Scout membership is a good thing, because the Scouts aren't what they used to be. They've equivocated on everything from letting girls in to homosexuals, even including homosexual leaders. They want transgenders to come aboard. They even took Boy Scouts out of their titles, so they're just Scouts BSA, not Boy Scouts anymore.
But Knight says the whole purpose of scouting is supposed to be about training boys to be men.
So when they denature it, they take the maleness out of it deliberately. They've destroyed what the Scouts once were. So I am delighted that Trail Life USA, formed by former Scouts, has picked up the baton and run with it. That's a great organization.
But Knight says the Boy Scouts will continue to be around for quite a long time.
When the Boy Scouts of Canada opened their ranks to homosexuals, they lost most of their membership. They're still around barely. But I think that's what will happen with the Boy Scouts of America. It'll take a while, but they'll just keep declining.
I'm Chad Groening.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and on the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
I shoot up dope when I was sad, when I was happy, or just was bored. I've lived off fast cash and drugs for a long time. The Teen Challenge took me in. This program saved my life. I won't be leaving the program the same person I was.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
This is a Trump tweet from today on leakers. He said the so-called leaks coming out of the White House are a massive over-exaggeration put out by fake news media in order to make us look as bad as possible. With that being said, leakers are traitors and cowards, and we will find out who they are. Can you tell us about that process of trying to figure out who is leaking from the communications department and what's going to be done?
I won't tell you the process so much as to tell you that there are all kinds of leaks. Some leaks exist to hurt, I guess, colleagues. Some leaks exist because they disagree with the policies that are being put forth. But none of them are helpful. And I will tell you there's something else that's going on in this White House, but not as badly as it was at the beginning, where it's not so much leaking as using the media to shiv each other. And that was going on quite a bit at the beginning of this administration, and it's less so now. But I think the president is on solid ground here, that if you work at the pleasure of the president, as we all do here, and you have the privilege and the blessing of coming today every work in this White House on behalf of the nation that we all love, then you ought to be competent, you ought to be loyal, and you ought to be able to reinforce the agenda that prevailed here. And so I can't go on more, but I had several discussions with the president on this very topic today.
Do you expect personnel changes as a result?
I do, actually. Yes, I do.
Okay, so welcome back to the show, afr.net and urbanfamilytalk.com. Don't forget to register if you're planning on coming to our Marriage, Family, and Life Conference that's happening in August 17th and 18th down in Tupelo, Mississippi. A lot of us will be there. Hosts from Urban, certainly, and other great national speakers will be joining in. It's going to be a great time. Definitely register for the conference. Welcome to the program. Thank you for being here today. Share the show, hit the like button, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to jump into a discussion about agnosticism here. Pretty interesting. Pretty interesting when we talk about what's going on. I think a lot of people really feel like, what's the big deal? It's not atheism. And so we're going to get into that. And then we also have our next guest, Marc, former press secretary to Mike Pence. He's going to come on. And then we're going to have a discussion in the last segment about the White House saying that Hamas is actually responsible for the deaths of the Palestinians who were protesting on the border of Israel. They're really angry about Jerusalem being the capital of Israel. That's contested territory in their opinion. And so, it's it is what it is. They can do whatever they want to do. So here we are. And I want to get into also this article that it's not being shared widely that talks about how we have an increase in CO2 on the entire planet and that it's making the planet more green. It's kind of unbelievable because people are so ignorant about what CO2 does. I remember learning about it in, the third grade, that the plants need the CO2 and the human beings need the oxygen. And so the plants make the oxygen and they consume the CO2 that we create. I know it sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? All right. So let's do just a little bit more information. I want to equip you with information that you can use to think about whether or not Christians should support people who are agnostic. So we just defined it at the end of last segment. We talked about agnostics being people who lack a belief in God. Now, that is also what people say about themselves when they're atheists. But there's a difference between atheists and agnostics, according to the definition. Atheists say they lack a belief in God the way they lack belief in invisible pink unicorns. In other words, they have no position, take no intellectual action, and have no belief or unbelief in the matter concerning God. To them, it's a non-issue. Now, this may sound sensible to some of us, but the problem is that once you're introduced to an idea, you can't stay neutral about it. So you either believe that I'm sitting here, that I exist, or you believe, as some people have emailed me, that I am a facsimile of a person. I do not really exist, and that behind all of the ideas and things that I say is really a 54-year-old white man who is basically in control of what you're seeing here. And we know that's ridiculous, but that's what I've been told in email. So you invariably make a judgment about an idea once it's presented to you. You brush it off. You think it's ridiculous. You think it's true. You think it could be true. You're intrigued by it. But something happens. You have a reaction no matter what. It's presented to you. You have a reaction. So an atheist can claim they lack belief after being exposed to an idea or contemplating the rationality. But according to carm.org, which is where this is the website I'm on right now, you have a position. At some point, you have a position. So Matt Slick says, let's pick a baby that has no awareness of the concept of invisible pink unicorns. Later in life, when the baby is mature and is introduced to the concept, he either accepts the existence of invisible pink unicorns, rejects them as a ridiculous notion, chuckles about it or dismisses it, becomes unsure about them, holds off judgment until later, etc., etc. Either way, he develops a position on the concept of these invisible pink unicorns, okay? So then he can do something with that concept once he's been exposed to it. He doesn't continue in a lack of belief or a lack of awareness state of mind, because the fact is some sort of intellectual action has to occur. You can't be unaffected by it. So that's what this whole agnosticism thing, it's really strange, because in your heart of hearts, you know you either believe or you do not. But you present to the world that you simply lack any judgment at all on the topic. Can you think of all the other subjects, matters in the world that you've been introduced to that you may not be interested in, but you never say, I lack a belief or I lack any position on it at all? I mean, I can think of all the conversations I've had with people on so many difficult subjects, and I've never had anyone say, I simply lack a belief or opinion on that subject one way or the other. I neither believe nor disbelieve anything about that subject. But people choose to say that about God, and they call that agnosticism. So animals lack a belief in God. Are they atheistic? Should we include atheists, infants, plants, rocks, water, and air in the category of atheism, since they too lack a belief in God? So what is the position, this whole lack of belief, really about? In Matt Slick's opinion, it's an attempt by atheists to avoid facing and defending the problem of the position. And in this piece, he talks about, it's Matt Slick, he talks about atheism, but there is a definitional difference in people who really are atheists. They do not believe in God, and agnostics, people who simply lack a belief or disbelief. And in any case, I simply reassert my position that if you choose to lack a belief or take a position on the issue of God, and our Constitution is based on inalienable rights, meaning they're given to you by God and men cannot take them away, and the Constitution serves to protect those rights from men who would attempt to take them from you. How can a person who is an agnostic, who simply chooses not to believe or not to disbelieve in God, defend those constitutional rights for you? And in the position of an elected official going into the U.S. government to take votes on your behalf, especially at the Senate level, at the House level, this is a decision they're making on a daily basis, to have lunch with this lobbyist or to not have lunch with this lobbyist, to listen to this suggestion for a piece of legislation that infringes upon your constitutionally guaranteed rights, or to refuse to do so because they believe that you are created in the image of God and that you have the right to self-defense, the pursuit of happiness, on and on and on, representative government, you name it. It's in the Constitution. You have a right to have those protections maintained and upheld, the Constitution maintained and upheld. And so no matter how slick and fantastic that person sounds, no matter how good they can defend their debate points, in the end, if they're an agnostic or an atheist, when the time comes, when the rubber meets the road, when push comes to shove, when it matters, when their vote is the deciding factor in whether or not we open the border and let hordes of people who really just want to come in here and take everything they can, let them in, whether that person's vote will be the deciding factor in whether or not we go to single payer, because we're already in Obamacare, we're already in socialized medicine. You only need enough votes in the Senate to take it from where it is now, which is a defunct program that was never designed to work, to single payer, where we are all literally enslaved to the government, paying for something that we may or may not even use. It's that moment when that person is to take that vote that you want to entrust to an individual who refuses to say whether or not they believe that we are all made in the image of Christ, that the universe came to be under the direction of the Word of God, that Jesus Christ is the Son and a member of the triune Godhead, that it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. A person who refuses to say whether or not they believe every time they look out and see a leaf or a piece of grass or whatever it is that they're looking at, that God's creation, the beauty of his creation, speaks to the Creator. A person who chooses not to acknowledge that, a person who will stand there to your face and tell you they're an agnostic and they choose not to state what they choose not to believe, they choose not to believe. That's who you want to trust with that kind of responsibility and power. So I'm asking you, not for myself, most certainly not for myself, but for your own self, because of the reckoning that you will have to give if you want to be explaining to God, who you believe in, that you preferred to vote for someone and give someone that kind of power over you and other Americans, who says they choose not to have a position on whether or not God is. That's my question to you. That you should ponder it and think on it and pray on it. And as a Christian, when you hear someone say, well, I just don't want religion shoved in my face. No one is asking for a senator or a member of the House to be a pastor or to lead a church organization, a flock, a Bible study, anything like that. I am not spending any time with any senators beyond the short legislative updates that I occasionally have had the opportunity to attend, or the occasional meeting when they're in the district and they say, I'd like to sit down and listen to some of your concerns, and I take advantage of that opportunity, as has only happened a couple of times. I already have a pastor, I already have a church, I already have Bible study, I already have people that I rely on for spiritual guidance and that will pray with me. I'm not looking for elected officials to do that. But it is, in my opinion, it smacks of us being willfully ignorant and easily duped when we will accept from someone a statement like, I just choose not to believe or not to disbelieve. As a Christian, that should be your little red light should go up, the little red warning lights that everybody likes to put the emojis on Twitter, those should be ringing in your head. You should be thinking to yourself, wait a second, I gotta pump the brakes here. This is not, I feel, where God would want me to go. And if you're not one of those people, if you're not a Christian, no offense to you, I want you to come into the family. I really want you to accept Jesus Christ into your heart. I want you to know that God is real, that he is here for you, that he sent his son, Jesus, to die on the cross, that he wants you to accept him so he can have a personal relationship with you. I want you to believe. But whether or not you believe doesn't change the truth about what I've just said. So, if I was the kind of person who was agnostic about the color of the sky and I chose to believe nor disbelieve. I have no opinion on whether or not the sky appears to the human eye as blue. None of the rest of you people would be like, yeah, you know what? I'm agnostic too. No, you wouldn't. You'd say, she just can't see. She must be colorblind. That's what you'd say. She's got something wrong with her eyes. She can't see the blue sky. And that would be the end of it. On something as simple as that. So on something as fundamental as who's going to go to Washington, D.C. and represent you, how can you allow that person to tell you to your face they are an agnostic and you, oh, sure, I like that. I'm going to go ahead and vote for you. How could you do it? So, I'm not going to get worked up. I'm just asking a question. I hope you'll answer it for yourself. We'll be back with more. We'll have Marc Lauder with us after these messages. Keep it here.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacy Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Over the last year, we have been hearing that the judges that President Trump has been appointing to the bench have been faithful to the Constitution. But few of us have time to read any of their opinions and determine that for ourselves. So today I want to summarize the first opinion rendered by Judge James Ho, who now serves on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Here is the opening line of his opinion. He says, the unfortunate trend in modern constitutional law is not only to create rights that appear nowhere in the Constitution, but also to disfavor rights expressly enumerated by our founders. For years, constitutional conservatives have longed to read this kind of sentence from federal judges. He wrote this dissent on a case that was to determine whether a $350 limit on political contributions was constitutional. He questioned the right of government to limit political participation. As citizens, he wrote, we enjoy the fundamental right to express our opinions on who does or does not belong in elected office. He also went beyond the decision at hand to observe that if you don't like big money in politics, then you should oppose big government in our lives. He also reasons that if you're going to ask taxpayers to devote a substantial percentage of their hard-earned income to fund the innumerable activities of various forms of government, then you should, at the very least, allow citizens to spend a fraction of that amount to speak out about how the government should spend their money. It's going to be fun to watch the career of Judge James Ho. Who knows, he might even someday become the first Asian American to serve on the Supreme Court. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much to all the people commenting on all the different streams, YouTube. I can't get into my Periscope right now, so I don't understand what's going on there. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. So good to have with us former press secretary to Mike Pence, Marc Lauder. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me, Stacey.
It's good to talk to you. So let's dig in. We've got the midterms coming. We have Mike Pence, vice president. We have President Donald Trump. What does it look like for these two?
I think we're looking in a very strong position, especially in the Senate, to expand our majority. I think we'll hold on to the majority in the House. And the fundamental reason why is that it's results versus resistance. the American people are seeing the results of the president's leadership in their paychecks. They see it in when they can look in the want ads and find new jobs. We have a record number of unfilled jobs available right now in America and a historic low unemployment rate. That's great for people who are in the workforce. It's great for people who are looking to get back into the workforce or are graduates who may be looking to get into the workforce for the first time. And ultimately, it's going to require the basic laws of economics. I mean, it's going to force employers to pay people more money to either attract them to their company or to keep them at their company. And that's good news for the American people.
It is, and I love hearing the good news. I'm as someone who have this program every day, and I have to sometimes disagree with certain things coming out of the Trump administration, and I always highlight the good things. It's nice to have a day where I can say, "Wow, we have had a good couple of weeks." I mean, we were looking at the 3 detainees coming back from North Korea, the new overtures between the North Korean dictator and South Korea's president, and their meeting at the demilitarized zone, the actual scheduling of a meeting between their leader and ours, and then, of course, pulling out of the Iran deal, opening the embassy in Jerusalem, and a few really interesting rallies held by the president on nights where he could have been at the White House Correspondent Dinner. He chose the American people. I mean, I think it's good news. It's nice.
It's exactly what the president told us he was going to do on the campaign trail. He's backing it up in the White House and working with Congress to get even more done. And I think that's one of the reasons why, despite the fact of the noise and nonsense coming out of the mainstream media, and 90% of the coverage so far has been negative toward the administration, his approval ratings keep rising because people can see the results for themselves. And despite what they hear, they're pushing through that, they're looking through that haze, and they're going, I like where we're going. That's why we've seen business confidence, consumer confidence, and America's standing strong again on the world stage. And those are the things that many Americans liked when Ronald Reagan was president. We're seeing it play out again right now.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your piece over at the New York Times. It's actually a piece by Alexander Burns, Jonathan Martin, and Maggie Haberman. And it talks about Vice President Pence trying to control Republican Party politics and Trump aides not being happy about it. Now, I've only skimmed through, the piece. And what I see is people at the New York Times trying to paint a rift or schism between President Trump and his vice president, when in reality, the vice president often does some work with the party leading up to a midterm to try to kind of coalesce things together. Doing that helps the president, and it helps the prospects for the midterm. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're right. And it was something I was on CNN last night with one of the reporters in that piece, and they even agreed that, well, vice presidents do typically, of both parties, take a much larger role politically as you head into the midterms, because being president is kind of a full-time job and running the country in the free world. But this is the thing, and I'll say it to you and your listeners, that what we're seeing in that piece, and there's another piece in Politico, is really nothing more than just some more leaks by some, unnamed sources in the White House who are trying to create palace intrigue where there isn't any. And what's even funnier is that last week and earlier this week, there were a lot of stories and discussions about how the vice president is too supportive of the president, and now he's trying to run a secret shadow campaign. So Washington can't even agree on what they want to say, which is just showing that they're just grasping at straws, throwing everything they can at the wall, and hope something sticks, because despite all that bad coverage, the president, Republicans are getting more things done, and the American people are seeing it.
Yeah, I got to say, I mean, more power to you for going on to CNN. I try to keep my appearances there to a minimum because it's always, so I always end up going on late at night. And then afterwards, it's just, it's like you're wrecked. Then you have to try to go to sleep, and you can't because you're so keyed up because it's always so negative. And so it's a tough one to take on. So I don't see Vice President Pence seeking to exercise expansive control over the party that's led by the president. I see him stepping in where there's a void. The president has a really heavy foreign policy kind of few weeks going on, and he needs to be focused there. Any missteps there will be capitalized by the media. They'll be jumped on. He'll be attacked about those. So he's really got his focus in the right place. And so Vice President Pence is saying, look, on the party side, I can definitely step in here. I can help. And I just don't see him doing anything wrong when we're actually having the high ground with the Senate at least. We can, kind of look at the Senate races and say we are going into the midterm with decent prospects.
And I'll tell you, Stacey, this all stems from a meeting at Camp David in January with the president, the vice president, their top political and their teams, where the president basically laid out the plan to say, I want the vice president to be the tip of the spear. The vice president, remember, has come through. He served 12 years in Congress, 4 years as governor of the state of Indiana. So he knows the politics. He knows the fundraisers. This is something that he's very familiar with. Where the president was more worried about being a billionaire and building great buildings around the world and those kinds of things. So this is really in the vice president's wheelhouse. And this is exactly what the president wanted him to do. I was with the vice president and president last week during that rally in Elkhart. And I'll tell you, the amount of people that come out, not only to the thousands of people that were in that arena, but the thousands of people who lined the streets for miles to see our motorcade go by with the president and vice president in it, it shows you how much they're connecting with the American people. There is that excitement. And while the vice president is very comfortable on the world stage or talking about tax cuts, he's also very comfortable in that political world. And I can tell you from having spent the last 2 years on the campaign in the White House with the vice president and the president that they don't make any moves that the other one doesn't know about. They communicate, and their top staff communicate so well together that is absolutely no daylight between them.
Yeah, I mean, so I got a chance to meet Vice President Pence. I've not yet had the chance to meet the president, but I met Vice President Pence here in St. Louis in an event during the campaign. So they were already the nominees. They were, they're nominated by the party, and they were traveling around. They came to St. Louis to kind of interface and put a public show on for then candidate Governor Greitens. And so they come to town, and afterwards, Vice President Pence starts working his way around the area. And I was in the VIP area, so I squeezed up to the front, and I got to shake his hand and get a picture with him. And these are not people that once you've met them or bumped into them, at least for my part with Vice President Pence, where you think incompetent, doesn't know what he's doing, isn't on. Not only was he completely present and in the moment, but his staffers, like I handed over my card to one of the staffers. He said, thank you, stuck it into the pocket. He didn't hand me one back, but he said, we may be in touch, yada, yada, yada. I just don't get the same impression. Now, with the leaks, I got to say, Mark, the leaks, like there's a little tiny part of me, and maybe it's tinfoil time, but a part of me says that some of these reporters are writing unnamed source or leaked from the White House when it's just something they think or some piece of gossip they overheard at the, Trump post office hotel, and then all of a sudden it makes it into a news piece. And then the rest of it is if the FBI has a mole in the campaign, then how do we not know they still don't have somebody working in the Trump White House or a careerist who's providing them with these bogus quotes and whatnot?
Well, I'll tell you, Stacey, and I've worked closely with the White House press corps during my time as a special assistant to the president and press secretary to the vice president, and I have a great relationship with most of them. And I will tell you, well, yes, if they overhear something at the Trump hotel, that they would likely report on that. But what we have here in many cases are young people or longtime career folks who believe that they're putting their interests, their personal beliefs over that of the president in which they serve. And it's unfortunate because when it comes out from the communications of the press shop, these are people who I used to work with, and they're my former colleagues, and in many of them I would likely consider friends. But when you get into settling political or personal vendettas against your coworkers by leaking information out like this, you are not doing your job, which is to support the president of the United States. And don't get me wrong, the comment that was made by Kelly Sadler, who is a friend and colleague of mine, about Senator McCain is despicable, and it's not something that should have been said. She apologized to the McCain family. But the person who leaked that was trying to do damage to not only Kelly, but also it set back the president's agenda. It's what the media has been talking about nonstop now for a week, more than a week. And they don't realize that. And if they do realize it, they should be fired. If they don't realize it, they're incompetent and should be fired. And I would just encourage all of them who are former colleagues. I see many of them on a regular basis when I'm in the White House. And I would tell it to them to their face right now, knock it off. Your job is to support the President of the United States, and that's your only focus.
I got to say, Mark, I agree with you. Not just the knock it off part, but, sometimes, especially you mentioned the youth aspect, sometimes when you're younger, you can't see what I like to call seeing around corners. It comes with age and wisdom and experience. But there are plenty of young people that I've met who they're already there. They can see around corners. And that's just basically predicting some of the outcomes of an action that you might take. And if you take the time to think it through, you're like, you know what? This isn't worth it. And so you decide not to do it. And so for a while, we had the leaks coming fast and heavy, and then there were a lot of changes. Today, I believe it was today, Kellyanne Conway was on one of the shows, and she said that, the staff changes, they're not done. There could be more oncoming staff changes. And if you look at the leaks, you would expect for people to rotate on out. And so people rotating out is not always an indication they've done something wrong. Sometimes it's a change that's needed for whatever reason. But the point is, I believe the president should rotate people out who are leakers, people who don't have the maturity to be able to see around the corner that leaking is always bad for the administration and it's bad for the agenda. And I'm hoping that they're able to figure out who it is and move these people on.
I totally agree. I know it's something they're very much looking at. And here's the fundamental reason why, is that when you are in a meeting at work, whether it is at the White House, whether it's at your network, or if it's in your workplace, for those of you who are listening, if you can't believe that you can have an honest discussion, and sometimes discussions about issues can be very heated and pointed as people with strong opinions debate, and then the leaders decide. That's the kind of input they need. They need to hear from both sides of an argument. And if you can't do that because you're worried if your colleague is going to turn around and leak your discussions or leak your position to try to undermine the president's decision or to shape the president's decision or any leader's decision, then you're not going to give your opinion. You're not going to argue as forcefully for your position as you would. And again, not disputing that the comments that were made most recently were wrong and should be apologized for. But play this out. It has broken a trust amongst that team. And I'm sure, and I've got a lot of confidence in Kellyanne and Sarah Sanders and General Kelly and the entire team there to be able to handle it.
I agree. I do think that they're going to be able to handle it. And I have to say, because we're getting towards the end of the segment, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today. Marc Lotter, former press secretary to Vice President Pence, and former special assistant to the president. It's invaluable having you here to share your insights and kind of give us connect everything together so we can understand the workings. As someone who I got to meet with staffers a couple of weeks ago about our blueprint from National Center for Public Policy Research and Project 21. And I tell you what, it's tough goings in there. It's not like strolling into, you can stroll into a Fortune 500 company and feel the tension of people who their jobs mean something and they have a lot on their plate. It was like that, but even more electric going into the White House. And it was also the same day that President Macron was in town, meeting with the president and Mrs. Trump, and his wife was there. And so there was a lot more security. And it was a privilege for me to get to go in. I can't imagine what it must have been like to get to work there on a daily basis and to go into those meetings. And so we really appreciate you taking the time to come on with us today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to being back.
All right. Look forward to talking to you again. Have a great week. I'm always excited to get to speak to someone who's had that experience, give us some insight here on the show. It's great to have that opportunity. I also want to point you guys over to StaceyOnTheRight.com. Take a visit. Hit the subscribe button if you'd like the newsletter. And if you are listening on radio, or if you're live streaming and you wish you were listening on radio, let your program director of your local station know that you want to pick up Stacey on the Right. That's happening. That can happen. It's as simple as an email, and we'll get it going. So right now I want to kind of talk a little bit about next segment. We have some updates about Charles Krauthammer. So if you guys have been longtime listeners of the show, you know I love to play a little audio soundbite from the Krauthammer. And he's been homesick for months, recuperating from multiple surgeries. And we have an update about him that we were able to find online. And we're also going to talk about the world getting greener, that CO2 information I promised you. So stay there. Stacey on the Right.
This is Uncommon Moments with Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren on their uncommon marriage adventure. Available now in paperback.
Some of us have seen some great role modeling. We've had the benefit of having a great dad who was a great husband. Some of us haven't had that benefit. But at the end of the day, we all have questions. Well, I've always found the best way to get those questions answered is to go to an expert, go to a guy with Hall of Fame credentials. The person we need to talk to about that and get those answers is Jesus Christ. Now, there may be some of you saying, well, wait a minute now. I know the Lord knows everything. He created women, but he was never married to one. How does he know about being a husband? Well, trust me, he does.
The Uncommon Marriage Adventure by Tony and Lauren Dungy. Now available in softcover from Tyndale Momentum. More info at CoachDungy.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God. One man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. But blessed is he who keeps the law. Our country is suffering because of lack of leadership, division, and a disdain for godliness. Urban Family Talk exists to be a prophetic voice as we speak on matters of religion, family, and culture. We will not be silent on issues plaguing our communities today as we sound the alarm of truth, wisdom, and empowerment. Join the movement at UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki Addison of Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk. Family is so important to everything. I mean, think about it. Right after God created Adam, he made family by creating Eve as his wife.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference this summer. We'll have a full slate of experts to help encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family.
Our speakers include Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, and more.
We'll even be there.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference will be Friday and Saturday, August 17th and 18th at Hope Church in Tupelo, Mississippi. Come help us fight back against the enemy's direct attack on marriage and family. That's the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference put on by Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right.
At the same time, there was a celebratory air in Jerusalem as the U.S. was moving its embassy. In the south of Israel, along the border with Gaza, there was a lot of violence that resulted in more than 41 people losing their lives. Is the president concerned about the demonstrations there and Israel's response to people trying to climb over the fence?
Well, we're aware of the reports of continued violence in Gaza today. The responsibility for these tragic deaths rests squarely with Hamas. Hamas is intentionally and cynically provoking this response, and as the Secretary of State said, Israel has the right to defend itself.
Well, we do. Israel has the right. The United States has the right. I don't see why anyone who has their own country would sit around and watch foreigners from just over the border launching rockets and bombs and missiles and under the guise of protest. Why you would allow that to happen and then say, okay, we're just going to let it happen. Just let them destroy our property. Let them harm our citizens. Why? Why would anybody do that? So we've had a lot of misdirection in the media surrounding what happened. And perhaps, that's the way people want to roll. Fine. But we're not going to have that as something we're interested in supporting here on this program. So this was what I had for today. Okay, now I'm going to have to shunt it off to the side because breaking news that two things. The suspect in a major CIA leak has been identified. The United States has identified a suspect in the leak of CIA hacking tools. Wow. So this is breaking news today. This is from the Washington Post, and it's being reported just now. The U.S. government has identified a suspect in the leak last year of a large portion of the CIA's computer hacking arsenal. You remember this story from last year. There was hacking that the CIA was able to do, and someone leaked it out, basically making it obsolete. Because as soon as you find out how someone's hacking, you can create ways to thwart the hacks. The cyber tools the agency had used to conduct espionage operations overseas, according to interviews and public documents, all of that information was leaked. Despite months of investigation, prosecutors have been unable to bring charges against the man who is a former CIA employee currently being held in a Manhattan jail on unrelated charges. His name is Joshua Adam Schulte, and he worked for a CIA group that designs computer code to spy on foreign adversaries. He's believed to have provided the agency's top secret information to WikiLeaks. Oh my goodness. The anti-secrecy group published the code under the label Vault 7 in March of 2017. And it was one of the most significant and potentially damaging leaks in the history of the entire Central Intelligence Agency. It exposed secret cyber weapons and spying techniques that also might be used against the United States, according to current and former intelligence officials. Wow. So that's breaking today. The other breaking news is that North Korea has threatened to cancel the summit with President Trump. They believe that the United States is involved in a provocative military ruckus in our actions with the joint U.S.-South Korea drills. They believe we're rehearsing for an invasion. Oh, that's pretty tough. June 12th is the date for the Singapore summit between Trump and Kim Jong-un. North Korean government is blaming the joint U.S.-South Korea military exercises. Pyongyang sees the drills as rehearsal. And Kim also canceled a meeting with South Korea's president on a few hours' notice. This is how volatile the situation is. We can be excited about it and we can count it as a win that we got the detainees back, but this is not settled. This is not, things can't be really calm until it's actually done. The United States will also have to undertake careful deliberations about the fate of the planned North Korea-U.S. summit in light of the provocative military ruckus jointly conducted with the South Korean authorities. And this is according to the state-run news agency KCNA. And they're talking about the Max Thunder joint military exercises between the United States and South Korea. So these are military movements that happen on a routine basis. It's training. And I guess he's saying, look, we've agreed to meet. Y'all can't be training up on my border. You can't be training down below there. Not going to put up with it. Wow. Okay. So that's breaking news. And then, of course, I'm not sure if it's been really covered, but the president has been to Walter Reed Medical Center to visit his wife, and he says she's doing very well. She underwent a kidney surgery at Walter Reed Medical Center. She had to undergo this surgery because she'd been experiencing an issue with her kidney, something that was benign but required medical attention. And the statement that they issued, it's Stephanie Grisham. She's the First Lady's communications director. She issued a statement saying this morning, First Lady Melania Trump underwent an embolization procedure to treat a benign kidney condition. The procedure was successful and there were no complications. The president also visited her. She'll be there a few more days before she's sent home to continue to recuperate. So, wow. Yeah. And of course, we didn't really cover it on the show, but one of the big deals for the First Lady from this past week has been the Be Best platform that she unveiled in a speech lasting 11 minutes in the Rose Garden. And she says it's a 3-pronged platform with a focus on opioid addiction, families, general physical and emotional well-being of children, and kindness and safety for kids using social media. It's pretty ambitious. Usually people just pick one area. So she says, I'm well aware that people, this is First Lady Melania Trump, are skeptical of me discussing the topic. I've been criticized for my commitment to tackling this issue, and I know that will continue, but it will not stop me from doing what I know is right. So that's her platform, the Be Best platform. And I'm glad she's come up with something that she's going to work on while she's the First Lady. And I wish her the best of luck with it. Hopefully it goes really well. So the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is hearing today arguments over the Trump administration's termination of DACA. It's a total circus, if you ask me, because they call the Ninth Circuit the Ninth Circus. They absolutely have no intention of adjudicating this fairly. And it's not a law. DACA was an executive order. So how in the world are they ruling on it? It's kind of amazing. So we've got all that going on. I want to give you guys a little preview for the remainder of the week. We have some pretty fantastic guests. You guys know Jesse Kelly, Marine Corps combat veteran. He's going to come on tomorrow. We have Jeannie Mancini, president of the March for Life. Fantastic organization. We'll enjoy speaking to her. Brad Todd, founding partner at On Message Incorporated. He's also written a book, The Great Revolt Inside the Populist Coalition Reshaping American Politics. Fascinating. We'll speak with him on Thursday. And then on Friday, we have Larry Pfeiffer, director of the Hayden Center, former chief of staff to the CIA, and director of the White House Situation Room. That's going to be pretty fascinating, and that's on Friday. So that will be what we get into. So now back to the show sheet. We first want to do an update from Fox News about Charles Krauthammer. He's, prolific writer, author, and commentator on Fox News, contributor and analyst over there. So it's number 5.
Finally tonight, an update that many of you have been waiting for, and I mean many of you. Panel regular now months ago, Charles Krauthammer, sent me a very nice email this afternoon, and he said I could share some of the good news about his recovery from multiple surgeries. He wrote, quote, "The worst now appears to be behind me, and I'm finally getting back on track with the rehab schedule that will eventually get me home. The whole staff here at Special Report is behind you, Charles. We're hoping and praying for no more setbacks and a speedy recovery." But here's the breaking news tonight. Charles is being honored at the Israeli embassy here in Washington tonight for his contributions to the U.S.-Israel alliance. And Charles said in that email the honor is especially meaningful to him on this day, the day the U.S. embassy officially moves to Jerusalem. Charles' son Daniel will be here in D.C. to accept the award on behalf of his father. Congratulations, Charles.
Really glad to hear that he's improving. And so that's looking forward to seeing him back on Fox and hearing his commentary. And, he's not the biggest President Trump supporter. He really isn't. But he still has some really excellent analysis that we've been missing. So it'll be great to have him back. I hope he's going to be back quickly, healing up quickly. So the title of this piece is by Matt Ridley. It's at thespectator.com. The spectator.co.uk. And the title is "The World is Getting Greener. Why does no one want to know?" So why isn't this being covered on the news? If nothing else but to offer some credibility to their arguments. So global greening, I actually had to think for a second for myself. I'm like, do I even know what global greening is? Global greening is the name given to gradual but large increases in green vegetation on the planet over the past 3 decades. The climate change lobby is keen to ensure that if you hear about it at all, you hear that it's a minor thing dwarfed by the dangers of global warming. Actually, it could be the other way around. Greening is a bigger effect than warming. So 4 years ago, Matt Ridley, came across this online video of a lecture given by Rangai Maneni of Boston University, in which he presented an ingenious analysis of data from satellites. This proved that much of the vegetated area of the planet was getting greener. So this is according to satellites. This isn't stuff people are making up. It's not their feelings. It's satellite data. In fact, overall in 30 years, the green vegetation on planet Earth has increased by a rather extraordinary 14%. This is occurring in all vegetation types, from tropical rainforest to Arctic tundra. So what was responsible for this ecological good news? Well, rising carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere for half of the greening. And not responsible, agricultural fertilizer, warmer temperatures, increased rainfall. Carbon dioxide, along with water, is the raw material that plants use to make carbohydrates with the help of sunlight. So it stands to reason that raising its concentration should help plants to grow. Now, this information startled Matt Ridley, and he was talking about, the global effects of CO2 levels on the quantity of vegetation. And he was wondering, had those global effects been measured? So he wrote about it, and his article was one of the first non-scientific articles on the satellite evidence for global greening, but not much of a market for good news as it pertains to the climate, because everyone needs to be in a state of constant fear and agony, worried that any second now the Statue of Liberty is going to fall down to the ground in a snowy tundra or melt down into a lava, eruption, because the earth is about to destroy itself. That is what global climate change, warming people, cooling people wanted you to believe, that any second now, the entire earth is just going to be swallowed up in a dust ball of fire and huge watermelon-sized hail. There's just no safe place where you can escape the effects of people driving SUVs instead of Priuses. So, of course, the results of the study by Maneni it wasn't published. But then later, he was able to get the information out after the Paris climate change, what he calls the Paris climate jamboree, the agreements. Once they were over, then they decided, okay, you can publish your information. So the results at that point, because he'd kept tracking them, were even stronger than what was concluded in his original lecture. At that point, he noted that almost 3/4 of the cause of greening was carbon dioxide, up from half. As the paper's lead author, Zhaijin Xu of Beijing University puts it, that's the equivalent of adding a green contingent twice the size of the mainland USA. So this is big news. It's big news and it's good news. A new continent's worth of green vegetation, all created within the span of a single human generation. So you know what the environmental activists are always saying? That we're cutting down too many trees. We're destroying too much vegetation. The carbon dioxide levels are so high that the plants can't handle it. Well, the truth is they're loving all the carbon dioxide. In response to the elevated carbon dioxide output in certain parts of the world, you're seeing more vegetation. Because you know what? This isn't man's creation. It's God's. He decides whether the creation is going to flourish or not flourish. But apparently that's unscientific, and saying it makes you a climate change skeptic or denier and worthy of flogging and, all that good stuff. I just love good news like this. It's fantastic. So that's the show for today. Thank you so much for being with us. God bless and have a fantastic evening.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those